Making round bale silage in Kentucky is not a new process. However, many more people are trying this, sometimes for the very first time. The purpose of this video is not to convince you to make round bale silage, although we think it's a great practice. The purpose of this video is to tell you the things that we think you need to know in order to be successful using this practice. The information in this video came about because of work conducted by the agronomy department at the University of Kentucky, in particular by Mike Collins and Dennis Hancock. Mike developed the basic answers from his research program, and Dennis, as a student of Mike's, took these practices and went to counties and ground truthed this technology to find out what works, what didn't work, to give us feedback, and then so that when we get done at this point, we've been through some of the same things you've experienced. If you have problems or questions after seeing this video or starting the process, contact your local extension office. They can either answer that question or get your question to the most appropriate person.
Round bale silage is a product of cutting livestock forage with similar equipment that we would use in hay production, allowing it to wilt to between 40 and 70% moisture, baling it in a tight uniform bale, and wrapping it in plastic to exclude oxygen. When the bale is wrapped in plastic and oxygen is eliminated from the bale, the fermentation process starts. The anaerobic microorganisms, those that do not require oxygen, start to produce lactic acid. That lactic acid reduces the pH of the bale to somewhere between 3.5 and 5, which stabilizes the bale and prevents any other growth of microorganisms. That way the bale is stable and can be stored for long periods of time. All species, grasses and legumes that we commonly use in Kentucky for livestock forage production can be ensiled. Grasses tend to ensile the best because they have more soluble carbohydrates, but the legume crops like red clover, alfalfa, Sericea lespedeza, etc. have also been ensiled and stable for long periods of time and produce a high quality crop. In hay production, we have a small window of moisture content. Somewhere between, something below 20% is usually what we shoot for. But in round bale silage, anything between 40 and 70% is adequate. Some producers want to know exactly what the moisture content is, and they'll buy high-priced hay probes. Our experience has been that most of these probes, which are priced between $250 and $300, are not that accurate at the high moisture range that we make round bale silage. The best general rule of thumb to use is just the twist test. Silage or crop that has been cut and allowed to wilt for a short period of time, take a handful of that, twist it hard, and if you see moisture appear in the process of forming a droplet, the moisture content is too high, and that crop should be allowed to wilt further before you make round bale silage. If you twist and you don't see any moisture form, then it's safe probably to form that into a round bale and make silage out of it. Excessively dry round bale silage doesn't ferment properly, but that's rarely a problem with our experience. It's usually the too high moisture content that we need to avoid because botulism could be a problem above 70% moisture. Another method is the microwave. With a microwave, you can take a small handful of sample. This also requires the use of a small scale to weigh the sample wet, place it in the microwave, dry it for approximately 4 minutes on a high setting, remove it, reweigh it. Do this multiple times in 1-minute increments after that, and once the product begins to stop losing weight, then you generally have your final weight. The water has been driven off, you get a final weight, and you can calculate moisture content. In general, for our grasses, it's important to cut the crop at the optimum stage of quality and also for yield, which is at approximately the boot stage. For our legume crops, again like red clover, alfalfa, we want to cut those crops when they're at about 1/10 bloom. This is a good compromise between yield and quality. If we cut at that stage, we have plenty of soluble carbohydrates for the fermentation process to conduct itself properly. With these cereal grain crops like rye and wheat, it's important that we cut those at the early boot stage. Generally, once those begin to mature, the quality of those crops drops more rapidly than our other cool season grasses and legumes. One of the greatest advantages to this round bale silage technology is that it allows us to cut the crop and put it in storage without having to wait on Mother Nature to provide adequate curing conditions. That can lead us into the field before we really should be in the field. The process of cutting and baling and transporting bales, we're using heavy equipment with heavy loads. If we get on soils that are too wet, we can develop a traffic compaction pan that could reduce yield in the future. When the soil is fully saturated, like it happens to be today, heavy traffic will cause ruts to form, but it doesn't force soil particles together into a dense layer that prevents roots from growing and exploring for nutrients. However, when the water has moved out of the profile by gravity, the soil particles are lubricated enough that we can move them and force them closer together, and that's when compaction can occur.
The same types of mowers that are commonly used for producing hay are also the best for producing silage. Disc binds that use that system for cutting the forage work fine. Traditional hay binds that have a sickle type mower and conditioner rollers also work fine. One comment there on conditioning. Since we're only wilting the material, I don't feel like conditioning is nearly as critical when we're just producing mowing material to be wilted for a few hours to produce silage. But I think we should go ahead and use the conditioner because that helps distribute the material more uniformly, and I feel like we get a more uniform moisture level during that wilting process by using the conditioner. What we have taken to doing, especially on the first crop, the first cutting, where with alfalfa or with cool season perennial grasses, you have a heavy crop that produces a thicker swath. I think a good approach is to set the wings, the shields on the hay bind so that the swath that's produced is about 4 feet wide, 3 or 4 feet wide, and then to do the wilting in the swath and avoid raking altogether. A 9-foot width produces a swath that's perfect for getting a good dense bale with a single windrow. Later on in the season, on the second and especially the third and fourth cuttings, the crop is often lighter and it's just not efficient to bale out of a single light windrow at that point. And we always rake that material. But we save a step in the process by avoiding the raking, especially on those heavier cuts. And I think the same thing would apply to summer annual crops like pearl millet or Sudax or some of those kinds of crops. In my experience, we have only run into 1 or 2 balers among all of those that really can't handle the wet material that you'll have with the round bale silage. The belt type balers, among the hay balers, the belt type balers I feel give you an advantage because they allow reduction in the bale diameter that's often desirable to reduce the weight of the bale. And even a small reduction in the diameter of 6 inches or so can reduce the weight by 1/3 and make bales handleable. Newer balers that are designed specifically for silage production are usually of this size. That's a 4x5 size package, not made to a full 5-foot diameter even in this case, but that size of package is good because typically in the silage range of moistures, it'll produce a bale that weighs 1,500 pounds plus or minus a couple hundred pounds. In wetter material, occasionally even then you can have a bale that could exceed a ton, but that's the most we would ever see. One thing we always want to avoid is making any holes in that plastic once it's applied to the silage. We would like that to stay perfectly intact during the entire storage process. So No special equipment is required if you do it that way. You just load and haul those bales back into the storage area, and then with the individual bale wrapper of the type we're looking at here, those bales can be loaded one by one with the wrapper if it has a loader arm, or with the loader tractor onto the wrapper, and then when they're dumped off after they're wrapped, that's where they should stay. The two major types that we've worked with and the two major types that are available on the market now will be either the individual bale wrapper of the platform type. That system we recommend as a standard sort of practice 4 layers of film of the 1 mil thickness be applied. 4 layers requires 2 complete revolutions of the bale on the platform wrapper with the setting that has a 50% overlap with each pass. With a 4x5 bale, typically that'll be somewhere between 18 and 20 turns of the wrapping unit to get that amount of plastic. The other major type of wrapper is the inline wrapper, in which the bales are placed onto the wrapping unit, which has the plastic moving around that row of bales on a hoop. And with that system, the ends of the bales are against each other with no plastic in between, and the plastic is put around the circumference of the bale. That system uses considerably less plastic, so in our research and other research has proven to be just as good in terms of providing a good storage environment for the silage, so equally good silage system. Uses half or a third as much film per ton of silage produced as the individual bale wrapper, depending on the number of layers that are used. A couple of considerations in choosing the best type of wrapping unit between those two major options. I feel that the individual bale wrapper is best suited for smaller producers who are wrapping in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 bales or less. With the individual wrap bales, that bale is well protected until the time the film is cut. And if the feed out is for example, only twice a week, then that bale will be consumed within 3 or 4 days, and under almost all conditions that should work well. In hot weather, even 3 days may be pushing what we would like to see for aerobic stability. With the inline wrappers and a slow feed out rate, the end bale, because with that type of wrapping system, once a bale is, once a row is opened and you begin taking bales off the exposed end of the next bale in line is open to the air until the next feed out. For producers who are wrapping 1,000 bales or 1,500 bales or 2,000 bales, a larger number, the inline wrappers are just so much more efficient in terms of labor during the wrapping process that I think with the larger numbers that becomes an overriding factor. The equipment for the inline wrappers are about 50% more expensive to purchase than the individual bale wrappers. But if a larger number of bales is being wrapped, then that's a major factor in the equipment cost per bale or per ton of silage that's being produced.
In summary, we'd like to make sure that you take care of these points in making round bale silage. First of all, make safety your first priority. Become familiar with the mechanical operation of the equipment. Remember that slow baling speed helps form tight, dense bales. High moisture round bales weigh between 1,500 and 2,000 pounds. Harvest the crop at the optimum stage of maturity for good yields and high quality. Avoid baling crops for silage containing more than 70% moisture or less than 40% moisture. Remember that bales should be wrapped within 12 hours of baling if possible. Wrap at the storage site to avoid damage to individual wrapped bales. Use high-quality polyethylene plastic film. A minimum of 4 layers of plastic should be used on each bale. To reduce waste and spoilage, feed only what can be consumed in a 2-day period. Check with your local government for policies on disposal of recycled or of used plastic. And if you have questions or problems, please contact your local Extension office.